Jignesh, you can
Okay,
start.
sir. Almost there is 14 participants are joined. So we will start our meeting. Hello, friends. Good evening, everybody. It is our great pleasure that I am Dr. Jignesh Vasan Chauhan and my colleagues, Dr. Vinayak Desai, sir, who are the host of today's webinar and got this opportunity to welcome all of on behalf of the Daisar Medical Association. Here I am request to all the participants to mute their microphone and please don't use your screen sharing option between our live webinar session. Here I am requesting our host, Dr. Vinayak Desai, sir, to produce the further session. Dr. Vinayak Desai, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Jignesh. Good evening, respected doctors. Welcome you all to our webinar of the Daisar Medical Association. It is almost 5 past 4. Today's topic is endoscopic surgery in pediatric urology, and it is conducted on the behalf of SRCC Children's Hospital, Mahalakshmi. SRCC is a premier medical institution for children in Mumbai. To share with us the recent advances in pediatric urology, we have with us renowned pediatric surgeon and director of SRCC Hospital, Dr. Ratik Shah, sir. To moderate the session, we have another leading pediatrician from Daisar, Dr. Hema Yadav, ma'am. Vote of thanks will be given by leading family physician, Dr. Rupali Kumawat, ma'am, from Borivali. To introduce the today's speaker, Dr. Ratik Shah, sir, I call upon our association senior practitioner and leading family physician from Daisar, Dr. B.K. Momin, sir. Over to you, sir. Momin, sir.
Uh, Good evening, everybody. Thanks, Dr. Minayak and Team DMA for inviting me to introduce Dr. Rashik Shah from SRCC Children Hospital, Haji Ali Park in Mumbai, Mahalakshmi. Dr. Rashik Shah has done his MBBS from the University of Mumbai and has completed his super specialization in pediatric surgery from Grant Medical College. He has successfully commenced his fellowship training at the University of Tennessee in USA, where he receives the opportunity to work with the leading doctors in the field of laparoscopic and thoracoscopic pediatric surgery. His pioneering work in the minimally invasive surgery in children has made him the recipient of several awards and prizes. I, Dr. B.K. Momin, on behalf of Daisar Medical Association, welcome to Dr. Rashik Shah to give his speech and enlighten us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Momin, Dr. Jignesh Chauhan, Dr. Vinayak Desai, Dr. Emma Yadav. It is a pleasure to be over here amongst the practitioners of Daisar and Daisar Medical Association. And I will start my talk with introduction of the hospital. So let me just minimize this. Okay. So as you know, SRCC Children's Hospital is one of the first, probably one of the first corporate hospital where pediatric care is given in almost all aspects, which includes pediatric cardiac surgery, pediatric neurosurgery, pediatric laparoscopy surgery. We do bone marrow transplant. We have started with liver transplant, and renal transplant will be done soon. So it is a comprehensive care of children. Whatever we need, we can do it over here. We have dedicated 24 by 7 ACL pediatric ambulance. So we can get the patients from any part of the Bombay, whether it is newborn, whether on ventilator, whether on inotropic support, all this can be done without any problem. We have 4,000 square feet of dedicated child play area. So if any kid comes, they don't feel like they've come to the hospital, and many kids will look forward to visit the hospital because it's a beautiful play area. We have 3 Tesla MRI state-of-art operation theater with all latest laparoscopy equipment, biplane cath lab for pediatric cardiac intervention, 120i slice CT scan. This is a beautiful lobby of our private ward, single room and sharing room. and there are a lot of activities for children and their parents are going on in the hospital. So idea is to keep the child occupied, and they should not feel that they are in the hospital, and they should get over their ailment and go home without any problem. So all these activities, of course, because of the COVID, there is a disruption, but we are back to normal. And when I say back to normal, we are in fact doing more work today, surgical work, more than what we used to do in the pre-COVID time. So our average number of surgeries have passed the pre-COVID level, and it is probably will keep on growing. So this was about the our hospital, and I'll start with my talk. So surgical update, sorry, that forget the title. It is minimal access surgery in pediatric urology. So there are a lot of indications of doing minimally invasive surgery in pediatric urology. One of the common is PUJ obstruction, and we do laparoscopic pyeloplasty, laparoscopic nephrectomy for non-functioning kidney as well as for Wilms tumor, laparoscopic heminephrectomy for duplex kidney, along with particularly the non-functioning moiety, we take it out. Laparoscopic ureterostomy can be done for duplex kidney and ureteral obstruction. Lap adrenalectomy for adrenal tumor. Vesico-ureteric reflux, we can do extravesical ureteral reimplant laparoscopically. We do vesicoscopic ureteral reimplant. Vesicoscopic means you put the ports in the bladder and then do the surgery. We do cystoscopic sting surgery. So all these are the options for a child having vesico-ureteral reflux, which is a cause of urinary tract infection. Abdominal testis means the undescended testis which is in abdomen or which is not palpable. We do laparoscopic orchiopexy. Urinary stone, like in adults, we can do it. In children, the same thing: PCNL, URS, RRS, cystolithotropsy, all that can be done. And the varicocele laparoscopic division of testicular vein. So all these surgeries can be done by using minimal access technique. We will go through some of the important part of diseases. We may not be able to cover everything in 45 minutes, but I will like to tell you what is important in many of these conditions. So in undescended testes, we classify into two types: palpable and non-palpable. In non-palpable undescended testes, it should be done laparoscopically. Uh, the standard investigations are done. We will not go into details of that. But if it is with hypospadias, bilateral non-palpable testes, then you have to investigate for disorders of sexual differentiation. The sonography, again, the role of sonography is doubtful in case of undescended testes. We have clinically palpable, non-palpable. If you do sonography, it is confusing because if they can't see the on sonography, and if we advise surgery, then parents ask us why you are operating, the testes is not there. But many of these testes will be there in abdomen and they can't pick up on sonography. Sometimes sonologists will say there is a testis, but you don't find on laparoscopy. So it creates a confusion, and because of that, we don't advocate sonography as such. Uh, Patient should be, yeah. So we do at 6 months the surgery, whether it is palpable or non-palpable. And once you do that, there are different types of abdominal testes or different findings. You can find on laparoscopy testes in abdomen. If it is away more than 2.5 centimeter, we call it as a high undescended testes, and we do two-stage Stephen Fowler. If it is low near internal ring, we call it as a low testes, and we can do single stage lap orchiopexy in most of the time. If we see vas and vessels entering the internal ring, it means it is atrophic testicle, and one should do excision of atrophic testicle with contralateral fixation, because you don't want to lose this single testis by torsion. If there is no vas and vessels, it means the testis is absent and contralateral fixation is advocated. If there is blind ending vas and vessels, it means vanishing testis and contralateral fixation should be done. So these are various findings. You can see the testis near the internal ring. You can do single stage. Here the testis is little far off, and we did 2 stage. So in first stage you divide the vessels, and after 6 months we go back and do the second stage. This is near the internal ring. You can do single stage. This is very high, almost 7-8 centimeter in the anterior abdominal wall. There is no way such a testis can be picked up on sonography. So this is the second stage which is going to be performed, and this is how we do it. These are the 3 ports which are being placed. Surgeon stands at the top end, and then you mobilize using pediatric 3.5 mm short instruments, 20 centimeter long. These are some more x-rays. Here you can see vas and vessels are ending blindly, and that means the testis had intrauterine torsion and has died. So in such a testis, you just fix the opposite side so that there is no torsion. There's another very high undescended testis, almost 7-8 centimeter. And here you can see vas and vessels entering the internal ring. And if the testis is not palpable, it means it's a atrophic testicle. Now, most of the time, the testis is near the internal ring when you are not able to feel. So the chances of bringing it down in one operations are much higher. And in 8 to 10%, you can do 2 stage. In remaining 20-25%, there is no testis or vanishing testis. Why you need to operate? Because if you don't operate, the function will go down, higher chance of malignancy, late detection of malignancy. Means if it is in abdomen, if there is a malignancy, it will spread before you can diagnose. So that is not good. 70% of chances of patent processes which can form the hernia, higher incidence of torsion, injury, and psychological issues. So you need to operate undescended testes. I'll show you short video clip. This is a testis which was little away from the internal ring, almost 2.5, and the mobility of vessels was not very good. This was a 6-month-old child who had bilateral non-palpable testes. On the left side, we did single stage, and on right side, it was away. So we did 2 stage. So in 2 stage, what we do in first stage, we divide the testicular vessels about 2.5 centimeter away from the testis. So this is a bipolar which is being applied. So you control the vessels. In bipolar, the spread is minimum. So that is good. You can alternatively, you can clip and then divide. You can ligate and then divide. You can use harmonic scalpel and then divide. And what it does is the blood supply of the testis is cut off. This is after 6 months. You can see beautiful collaterals from the vas. This is the vas. So along the vas, the vessels are developed, and they go to the testicular vessels and then go back to the testes. So what was done in past in such a testis, people used to do orchiectomy because the chance you don't want to leave the testis in abdomen. So chances of bringing down this operation, without dividing testicular vessels was very low, and people used to do orchiectomy. Then people started doing it by microanastomosis, but again the results are not excellent. So this is the best. With this, the survival of the testis is almost 90-95%. 2 stage Stephen Fowler orchiopexy. So this is the second stage is being done. On the pedicle of vas, we will bring the testis into the scrotum. So this is, you leave the pedicle of peritoneum about 1 centimeter from the vas so that you don't damage these collateral vessels. Once we do this, this is the gubernaculum which has been divided. And then we will pull these testes by extraperitoneal route into the scrotum. So this was being done in a 6-month-old child, first stage, and the second stage we did it at around 1 year. So that is the gubernaculum, the last part which has been again cauterized and then divided. Then we are checking if it goes to the opposite internal ring, that's the bladder in center, then you can bring it down. If it goes to opposite, now we are creating extra peritoneal route for the testes to come down. And then we make an incision in the scrotum, and from there put a hemostat or artery forceps and pull these testes into the scrotum. Here you can see iliac vessels which are pulsating. So you have to be careful of all this structure. you have to decompress the bladder and make sure the bladder is not injured. Then you pull this testis. Yeah, so that is how we do it. So eh, what we'll do, we'll take the questions at the end. You have to tell me when the time is over so that I can stop at that time, because our presentation is much longer. The another common condition in children, what we see is in newborns and even antenatally diagnosed, is posterior urethral valve. So often we can diagnose antenatally with bilateral hydroureteronephrosis and keyhole sign on sonography. It means there is a posterior urethral valve. Now, some patients where the liquor is not adequate, we can do fetoscopic or cystoscopic incision of posterior urethral valve. We did in one of the 22-week gestational age fetus fetoscopic surgery about 6 weeks back. So all this we have started doing even antenatal intervention at SRCC Children's Hospital. The postnatal cystoscopic incision of PU valves can be done, or one can do early delivery depending upon the requirement. Postnatal diagnosis can happen. I mean, if it is antenatally diagnosed, then we do postnatal NCU and we will be able to detect the posterior urethral valve. Some patient may not have detected antenatally, but they may come with urinary infection. Then we will investigate the child and we will come to know there is posterior urethral valve. On MCU, what you see is a dilated posterior urethra. So that is posterior urethra which is dilated. There is narrowing, and then there is a narrow stream of urine. There is bladder neck hypertrophy, crenated thick wall bladder, and there may be associated reflux. Now, if anything is there, then this patient will need an operation. So in operation, what we do? We do cystoscopy and then we divide the valve. So what you are, this is the verumontanum. You see, that's the diaphragm. So this is again, we have a fine cystoscope. The size will be about 2 to 3 millimeter in diameter. And this is the something like hook. You can see beautiful diaphragm. And then you basically divide this diaphragm. And once you divide, even if it is one position, 12 o'clock also, that is adequate. But sometimes we do at 5 and 7 also. So that is the posterior urethral valve which is being divided. The results are excellent provided the kidneys are functioning well. So even in premature newborn child today, we can do fulguration of the posterior urethral valve. In past, because we did not have small size scope, we used to do vasicostomy, means divert the urine from the suprapubic area, and then later on we will fix that. We'll do cystoscopy and fulguration once the child is grown up. So that was done in past, but today, now this is all incision has been made. We will do little more of that, and then we are done. So we have divided at 12 o'clock, and then at 5 and 7 in some of the patient will do it. So this is adequate fulguration. There will be some spread of diathermy and there will be more necrosis. You don't want to do overdo, because if you overdo, chances of stricture is there. So you don't want to do extra. The another condition which we is not very common but we do see is the varicocele. So if you see on this side, this is a normal pampiniform plexus and this is abnormal dilated plexus. Now that happens because of failure of one-way valve in the testicular vein, and because of that the blood while going up into the inferior vena cava, there is a reflux and there is a dilatation. So some patients may have pain, dilated veins and swelling on palpation, and in older patient will be infertility. It becomes tense with Valsalva's maneuver, and on sonography you can confirm the diagnosis. Always rule out any tumor on the left side. When you have varicocele on left side, which is the common side, so you have to rule out renal tumor by sonography. And if they are symptomatic, then they should undergo surgery. If there are no symptoms, you may not operate. So this is one of the 13-year-old boy who came with pain in the testes with varicocele confirmed on sonography. then underwent division of the testicular vessels. Now here you can see multiple small vessels are there and one large testicular vein is there. So there are multiple. That's the internal ring. So we have opened the peritoneum just at the testicular vessels, and then the important thing is if you can save two important things. You have to try and save the testicular artery and you have to save the lymphatics. Obviously testicular artery because you want to preserve the blood supply. But at the same time, even if you end up dividing the testicular artery, most of the time testes will survive. As you can understand, because in Stephen Fowler orchiopexy, we do the same thing. But if we can preserve, it is better. The lymphatics we want to preserve because otherwise they can develop hydrocele. So you can see beautifully here, there is a testicular artery. You can see the pulsation. That's the testicular artery. So we will divide everything else except the testicular artery. We will save some of the lymphatics so that there is no post-op hydrocele formation. So these are all vessels which are being divided. This is running at double speed, so that's why it will be little jerky movements. So now you can see there's one dilated vein is left, so that is the probably the culprit vein because it's dilated, and you can see beautiful artery. That's the pulsation of artery you can make out. So last is this dilated vein has been divided. Some lymphatics and testicular arteries preserved. Post-operatively, most of them will do well, but you have to explain that there is a 5% chance of recurrence, and if recurrence happens, it can be because of the reflux of the blood from the vessels of the vas. So then you divide this culprit artery also, that then these are small lymphatics, and there's the testicular artery. So you leave behind that so that there are no problems. Then PUJ obstruction. Again, PUJ obstruction is pelvic-ureteric junction obstruction. So kidney will drain urine into the pelvis and from there into the ureter. So at the junction, if there is a narrowing, which is functional, it's not mechanical, it's the muscles which are oriented normally in a spiral fashion, they arrange in a circular fashion, and this circular muscle contracts, does not allow urine to go down. So then they will have dilatation of the pelvis and kidney. So that is known as PUJ obstruction. And occasionally it can be because of the polar vessel, which is lower polar vessel corrosives that area and creates a obstruction. So they can present with pain, urinary infection, but most of the time today it is antenatally detected. And then postnatally we confirm that it is PUJ obstruction and then do the surgery. So contralateral PUJ obstruction can be seen in 10 to 40% of the patient. In some patient, there can be dysplastic kidney. And in 10% of the patient, there will be associated vesico-ureteral reflux. But usually the reflux is mild grade and does not need any treatment for that. So investigations, we said about sonography. Now, important thing for you people to remember is if the dilatation is more than 20 millimeter, AP diameter, anterior posterior diameter of pelvis, more than 20 mm, most of them will need surgery. Less than 10 mm, most of them will not need surgery. Between 10 and 20, it's a gray area. So what we do, the second investigation is a renal scan or EC renal scan or DTPA renal scan. And it is a dynamic scan, and it will tell us what is the drainage time, whether it is more than 20 minutes, then the drainage is not good and they will need an operation. If we do the split function, if it is less than 40%, again, they need an operation. Or on serial scan, if there is reduction of function by 10%, then one should operate. So apart from sonography, second important investigation is the renal scan. We generally don't do MCU unless the ureter is dilated. And as I told you, usually it is mild grade and does not need any treatment. I'll show you a short video clip of pelvic-ureteric junction obstruction. This is laparoscopic pyeloplasty being done. That's the colon over here. You can see descending colon. It's a left side PUJ obstruction. So what we are doing is transperitoneal pyeloplasty. And we feel the transperitoneal pyeloplasty is best because the chances of conversion are less. It's a beautiful picture and you can do excellent job. So that is pelvis, which is dilated about 3 centimeter, is been divided. So that's the pelvis. And then this is the ureter. So you make an incision on the ureter and make sure we go up to the dilated ureter, not the narrow area. Sometimes that narrow segment can be for little longer than half a centimeter. It can be 2, 3, 4 centimeter also. And then you suture it back, pelvis with the ureter. So that is a posterior wall which is being done. These are the absorbable sutures. So these are the vicryl sutures which are being used. So you do pelviureteric anastomosis. Now once we complete the posterior layer, we put a DJ stent. So this is double J stent. We will put into this so that the lower end reaches the bladder. And once you put that, the upper part you put it in the pelvis, you confirm that lower end has reached the bladder, and then we complete the anterior layer. So that is anterior layer is being done. Then we put a drain and come out. So that is the anterior layer is being done. Then we suture back the peritoneum. The drain is in place. The results of laparoscopy pyeloplasty are excellent. We have done about 185 pyeloplasties, 86 being in infant. Infants means less than 1 year old. Many of them will be about 2 or 3 a month old, weighing 4 kilo, 5 kilo. We did 3 recurrence of open surgery also laparoscopically. But fortunately, all our laparoscopy surgery cases are doing fine and we don't have to do anything recurrence wise. In general, the results are very good. 98% plus will do well. The advantage of laparoscopy in pyeloplasty is the magnification. What we can see over here is multiple times, 20, 25 times view. Even if we use loops, the vision is not that clear. So today, pyeloplasty should be done laparoscopically. Another condition, what we see is a duplex kidney. Duplex on the left side, you can see there is a double kidney, double ureter. So that's the upper moiety ureter, which is opening lower down, lower moiety ureter, which is opening laterally. So this is known as Weigert-Meyer law. And the upper moiety ureter is usually obstructing. So usually it is dilated.
હા
Lower moiety
હા
ureter can have
શું
vesico-ureteral
છે
reflux.
ત્યાં ખબર છે
Okay, so we are back to business. Uh, so upper moiety ureter is generally dilated, lower moiety is refluxing. Now, if you see on IVP, this is known as drooping lily appearance. On left side, do you see the calyces are drooping down? It means there is something on top. It means there is a duplex, and that upper moiety is dilated, and because of that, this is a drooping lily sign. So what we learned today is one is Weigert-Meyer law, second is drooping lily sign. Third important thing is some kids, particularly girls, if they come with continence with incontinence, meaning the child is passing urine normally, at the same time there is a continuous dripping of urine. So that is known as continence with incontinence. That means that the ureter, probably there is duplex kidney, and the ureter is opening in the vagina. And if that, so it is ectopically opening in the vagina, and because of that, there is a continuous dripping. So you investigate this child, and uh, uh, if you confirm on investigation, then you go ahead with some surgery. So as we discussed, upper pole is obstructing, lower pole is reflexive. Both ureter can be in one sheath. Uh, yeah, so we will show again. This is a short video clip. In a 4-month-old child, girl who had a recurrent urinary infection. You can see that is uterus, suspensory ligament. So what we are doing is again same thing, reflecting the descending colon. This is on left side. So reflect the colon. Now what you can see is that's the renal vessels. That's the renal vessels, and we are using harmonic scalpel. We will have to dissect the renal vessels so that this dilated ureter, which is going into the upper moiety, which is the cause of urinary infection, we can tackle that. So here you can see two ureters. That's the normal ureter. That is a dilated ureter. They are very close. This is one of the difficult operation, heminephrectomy, taking out part of the duplex kidney. It's not an easy operation. So we have divided because here you have to preserve the normal ureter, which is very close to the abnormal ureter. You have to preserve the blood supply. So technically it is demanding. So here we have now dissected the upper ureter. We will take it behind the vessels. That's the renal vessels. We have to preserve the renal vessels and then take the ureter above that and then continue our surgery. So this is the again renal vessels there. Now we have dissected the renal vessels. We have gone above using this dissection. Now we will have, once we divide the vessels which are going, that small twig you can see which is going into the upper moiety. Once we divide this, we will see line of demarcation onto the kidney and there will be a groove. So we will take out that part of the kidney. So that is what is being done. So results of this surgery are quite good. We have done about 12 surgeries as of now, heminephrectomy, without any problem. So then that is the last part, dividing the vessels. I mean, dividing the kidney tissue. So this condition is known as heminephrectomy. This is the harmonic scalpel which cuts and coagulates at the same time. So it is real boon while doing laparoscopic surgery. So last part is being divided and then we will put it in a bag and take out, and then we dissect out the lower ureter as much as possible and take it out. But we don't want to damage the lower ureter. So it is not important to take out that entire ureter. Now, another very important topic is vascular reflux. It's a vast topic, but I will just tell you the important points in this. So this is one of the commonest cause of urinary infection in a children, particularly in the girls, because it's a very common in girls. Almost 85% of the time it is in girls and 15% of the time it's in the boys. The reason is the anatomical problem. Normally what happens, the ureter opens obliquely, and because of that, when the muscles contracts, the ureter lower part gets compressed. Now if it opens perpendicularly, if it is not oblique, then when the bladder contracts, it can reflux because there is no compression of the lower ureter. So that is the anatomical problem, and that is known as the primary vascular reflux. Then there are many causes of secondary VUR. So if there is any cause of distal obstruction, it is because of that there is decompensation of detrusor muscles, giving rise to secondary VUR. We will not go into the details of causes. And then there are grading. Mild grade is mild reflux up to grade 1 is in the lower ureter, and grade 5 is going into the kidney with severe dilatation and with clubbing of the calyces. So that is grade 5. And the urinary infection, all of you know how it presents. It presents with fever, flank pain, pyuria, dysuria. And then if they have this, then you have to investigate the child. And then apart from standard urine routine, common, CBC blood culture, what we do is micturating cystourethrogram, and that will tell us what exactly is the child has. So you see bladder counter, whether there is diverticulum, whether there is uretrocele. So here what you can see is the uretrocele, negative filling defect. Then if there is a reflux, you will see grade of the reflux. Here you can see again uretrocele, duplex ureter, double ureter. So bladder neck anatomy, how it is, urethral patency, whether it is normal, abnormal. So here you can see vascular reflux with clubbing of calyces. Here you can see the diverticulum. This is posterior urethral valve. So all this you see in the MCU, and you rule out the secondary causes. And then if it is primary, what you do uh, radionuclide cystogram can be done. We will not go into details of that. The standard is micturating cystourethrogram. In some patients where you expect neurogenic bladder, then we do uroflowmetry along with urodynamic study. And after the attack of urinary infection, we do DMSA scan. It gives us two important idea. One is what is the function of the kidney. Sometimes if it is dysplastic kidney which is non-functioning, you may have to do nephroureterectomy. So it gives us the function of the kidney. And second is it shows the scar. Scar means the patient had infection in the kidney. So if there is multiple scars which increases over the time, it means this patient will need surgery. Non-functioning kidney will need surgery. So this it helps us in the assessment in the future. We will not go into the associated anomalies. Now, important thing is vascular reflux can subside in many children, and that is the reason you want to treat them conservatively as far as possible, unless there is an indication of surgery by recurrent urinary infection on chemoprophylaxis. So if you are treating it conservatively, 30 to 35% of the patient will resolve every year, and many of them will resolve by 5 years. If it does not resolve by 5 years, then it is unlikely to resolve, and then they should be operated. So management, as I told you, spontaneous resolution is not known. High grade reflux, less likely to go away. Grade 1, 2, 3, more likely to go away. 4, 5, less likely to go away. Sterile reflux is usually benign, so it does not give problem. If there is infection, then it will give rise to problem. What we do, we give low dose, 1/4 dose of the antibiotic at the night time. So if you do that, the chances of infection decreases. What we give? Amoxicillin, cefixime in the child who is less than 8 weeks old, trimethoprim, sulfamethoxazole, or Septran or Bactrim, or nitrofurantoin. So all these antibiotics you give as a uroprophylaxis. If there is breakthrough infection on antibiotic prophylaxis, then they need to be operated. Uh, and if there is any associated anomalies, then they will need an operation. So what we do in operation, uh, so what are the indication? As I told you, breakthrough infection, failure of medical management, non-compliance of the patient, persistent reflux, ureteral obstruction associated VUR that should be operated early, refluxing ureter opening into bladder diverticulum, and cystoscopic observation of gall fold. All this needs to be operated. Relative indication is grade 4, 5 reflux. Then you may do it early. Paraureteral diverticulum, and girls whose reflux persists even after 5, 6 years should be operated. I'll show you short video clips. So before that, what are the options? Transvesical ureteral replant. It can be done open or vasecoscopic. I'll show you a short video clip of vasecoscopic. We can do from outside the bladder. It can be done open or laparoscopic. I'll show you short video clip of that. And then submucosal injection or sting. So that is a cystoscopy in one of the patient where we did vasecos. So that's the right or normal ureter opening into the bladder. That is the left ureteric opening. So right was abnormal, what we saw on cystoscopy. So this is the catheter which is put from the urethra, came into the bladder. It has gone into the ureter, and then you make an incision around that. So these ports are in the bladder. So we are doing vasecoscopic surgery. You can see that's the urethral opening or bladder neck, catheter feeding tube coming from there. So this ureter is being mobilized. The same thing what we do in open surgery, we do it at vasecoscopic. The advantage is the scars are less. We are not cutting the entire bladder. So the bladder spasm and other problems are relatively less. You can see that's the muscles and that's the ureter. That is the bladder muscle. So you have to dissect that. So this has been dissected. So we will keep on dissecting so that this particular child had a obstructed ureter. So you will see now there is a dilated ureter coming out. So you can see there is a definite difference between the size of the ureter. This small size ureter or tiny ureter, the length can be variable. It can be 1 centimeter. It can be sometimes 4-5 centimeter also. So this is a dilated ureter which has been brought out. Then what you do is make a tunnel. So that tunnel between mucosa and the muscles of the bladder. So that is ureteric catheter which is placed on the left side so that we don't damage the left ureter. Uh, that is the bladder which is incision extended. That is a submucosal tunnel which is being created. Then the ureter will be pulled in that and sutured over there. So when the bladder contracts, this submucosal part of the ureter will get compressed and the child will not have any reflux. So this is for the prevention of the reflux. So that is a tunnel which has been created. Then we will pull this ureter into the submucosal tunnel. Then the terminal part will be excised and then the ureter will be sutured. So again, these operations are relatively complex, difficult, and not everybody will be doing it. So then you make an incision right there. We have created adequate tunnel, which is adequately long. So now we will fix that. We put multiple sutures. Yeah, then the bladder defect is been closed. Then you put a DJ stent and then you come out. So DJ stent has been already in place. It was placed, yeah, here it was been placed, which I just passed it. So that is a ureteric stent which is placed, double J stent. Then you close the defects. Then you put a Foley's. This is how Foley's looks in the bladder. Then you take out the ports and close the port sides. So that port is out. This is another port which is out. So this was the transvesical, this is extravesical. So here again cystoscopy is done and what you will see is the diverticulum. So how the diverticulum looks on the cystoscopy. Can you see that huge diverticulum? Yeah, I'll just, and then we did it laparoscopically. This is the diverticulum which is mobilized. There's the vas deferens. There is a ureter over there. So we will excise right up to the uretrovesical junction. Then suture the ureter. That ureter is being sutured with the bladder over the DJ stent. Then put it in a extra mucosal tunnel. So then this is the tunnel which is being created and we will suture it back so that it will prevent the reflux. So that is the suture, that is the extra mucosal tunnel. You can see that is the mucosa and this ureter will be placed in that tunnel and sutured it. So this is known as extravesical ureteral reimplant. And now we will see, after this, we will see one video clip, which is the simplest of operation, and it is known as sting. So here the extramucosal tunnel, it is being closed now. The detrusal muscles to muscle approximation is been done. Sorry. Okay. So I will show you this endoscopic management. So if the reflux is mild, grade 2, grade 3, what we do is inject this deflux or Dexel at uretrovesical junction. What it causes, it creates a bulk and it will prevent the reflux. So that is known as sting surgery. But if you do it in grade 4, grade 5, the results are not excellent. And this injection, that 1 ml will cost us almost 35 to 40,000 rupees. And results are not great. So those who are affording, we can do this procedure. Those who are not affording, one can do directly regular operation, which we saw either vesicoscopic or extravesical ureteric reimplant is indicated. Now, that was the endoscopic management. Now, the complication of these surgeries are persistent reflux, but usually it subsides. Sometimes they develop contralateral reflux, but again, most of the time you don't need to do anything. Occasionally it can create obstruction. So obstruction will particularly happen when there is a ischemia of the ureter, and you have to be careful of doing that. Uh, Last short video clip I'll show and then we'll stop is adrenalectomy. This was for the pheochromocytoma. So that is the diaphragm, what you can see. That is the spleen, stomach, descending colon, everything is mobilized. That is kidney, and on that's the pheochromocytoma. So the advantage of doing it laparoscopically is that for excising small tumor, you have to make a huge incision if you do it open surgery, and all problems with open surgery, which all of you know today. So we'll not go into that, but that is a pheochromocytoma. This was of course a large one, almost 6.5 centimeter in length. There were two nodules in the same tumor, so that is being mobilized. And then the important thing is the relations. See, we will come to know about the, yeah. So that's the adrenal vein. That is a left renal vein, and that's the gonadal vein. So we dissect all this vein laparoscopically, and then we will tackle this adrenal vein using, this is a special Hemlock clip, which is a locking system. So it is unlikely to slip, because if it slips, there will be sporential bleeding. So we do that and then apply the clip there, yeah. And then divide this, and then you using LigaSure. LigaSure is bipolar vessel sealing device. So with that, you continue uh, 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 division of all structure which are adherent to the adrenal tumor. And at the end, so this is now, that's the kidney, and over the kidney, we are going and taking it out. So once you divide the adrenal vein, the most most important part is done, because this secretes the renin, and it gives rise to high blood pressure. It fluctuates. So once you take care of that, the blood pressure is under control, and sometimes they need to give medication to increase the pressure also. So we take it out. So that is about the adrenal tumor, which can be done laparoscopically. So at the end, you put it in a bag and then take it out. So this was the gauze piece was placed to control the bleeding. Put it in a plastic bag and take it out. So with this, I'll stop my talk, and then if you have any questions, I can answer that.
So wonderful talk and wonderful demonstration of the various modalities. Hello?
Yeah.
Audible.
Yeah, so it's the first time we could see, the vesicoscopic view, and it was amazing the modalities you all use for almost, the bleeding also was so less
Yeah.
compared to open surgery. So I would like to know the age group, like in undescended testes and all. The parents usually want to wait it out. So
So
what would you suggest?
So we don't want to wait beyond 6 months. Why we wait up to 6 months? Is the testis, which is likely to come down on its own, will come down in first 2 to 3 months. If it does not descend by 3 months, it is very unlikely that it will descend later on. We still give extra 3 months. Said we do at 6 months. Why we want to do at 6 months and not at 2 years? Because the more time it spends in the abdomen, there is higher temperature. Higher temperature will give rise to uh, uh, function will deteriorate because of the high temperature. So you don't want to wait. Longer it stays in abdomen, more likely that it will have chance of developing malignancy. So because of all these reasons, you don't want to wait a lot. So ideal time today, if somebody comes to me at newborn, I'll say I'll reassess at 3 months. And then if it persists again at 6 months, and then go ahead with surgery. Now I have parents who will tell me even why you don't want to operate at 3 months. So it is how you convince the patient they will get ready. But you don't want to certainly wait longer than 1 year if they have come to you. Many times they don't get it detected and they will come in later on in the age group. So I have operated at the age of 15 years. I have operated with my adult urologist colleague at the age of 38 years. And in all of them, we will bring down the testes in the scrotum. We don't do orchiectomy because the reason why orchiectomy people were doing because they were not able to bring it down into the scrotum. The incidence of malignancy is there, but if it is in scrotum, we tell them to do self-examination. So if I operate in a child, I'll tell my parents of the child that please teach him self-examination. So I think all of you, if your patient has undergone orchiopexy, teach them self-examination when they are at the age of puberty. When they reach 15, 16 years, tell them if there is heaviness, increase in the size, please report to doctor because you can early detect and the results are good if you do early detection. And this malignancy happens usually in the third decade. So around 30, 35 years they develop. So we need to teach them self-examination, which will help them. So that is about undescended testes. Now in each, there will be like in vesicuretary reflux, again, we don't like to do reimplant in a newborn period because the bladder size is small. So ideal time would be at the age of 1 year. Though we can inject at the age of 3, 4, 5 months if the child is adequate size and it can take my large size cystoscope. Particularly in girls, we can do it more easily than in boys. So the injection can be done at 5, 6 months. The surgery, the youngest we did it in 4 months, the extravesical reimplant, because that child had only single kidney. That girl had single kidney with dilated ureter, which was obstructed. So we did at the age of 4 months because we did not want to do ureterostomy. The another option was ureterostomy if they have problem at the age of few months. But when there is a single kidney, if I do ureterostomy, bladder will not grow. So it does not serve any purpose. Why you want to wait? The bladder should grow. So youngest we have done at 4 months, but we will like to wait till the age of 1 year. We do at 10 months, 11 months in many of the child because they need operation. So depending upon the condition, you decide when you want to operate. Another is PUJ. So in PUJ, what we do is we do the renal scan at the age of 6 to 8 weeks. We don't do it early because the kidney has to mature. The glomeruli tubulars has to mature. If we do in newborn period, the results are not good. Interpretation is not correct of the scan. So we like to wait it out 6 to 8 weeks unless they come with the lump. If they come with the lump, we may do the scan early and then operate. But if they don't have lump, which is most of the cases, they don't have lump, then do at 6 to 8 weeks and then do the surgery whenever between 8 to 12 weeks, unless the function is really poor. So in each and every condition, there will be a time when we do the surgery. So PUJ, we said that. Now in case of double ureter or duplex kidney, we will do surgery if the child is symptomatic. In the sense, if the child comes with urinary infection, then we have to operate. We have no option. If they don't have urinary infection, but if they have just dilated ureter, many times it will be with ectopic ureterocele. Then we may have to de-roof the ureterocele. So obstruction is cleared. And then if they have problem further, then you take a call whether heminephroureterectomy or reimplant. Any other question, Hema?
And one patient too who had only single kidney by birth.
Yeah,
The other kidney was atrophic or not developed
absent.
as a fetus. So yeah, no, it was not completely
Okay,
absent, I guess.
okay.
But so in those cases, like how frequently you tell them to follow up, or like what do you
So
tell them surgically? Do they have?
yeah. So again, if one kidney is not functioning and other kidney is fine, we don't have to worry. if it is functioning fine as well as there is no dilatation, then one kidney is sufficient. So they don't need to follow up. In first year, you may call them few times quarterly, but after 1 year, if the child is fine, maybe once in a year, one should follow up and make sure that that kidney tissue is adequate for the child, that it is sustaining the creatinine level is normal even when the child grows up, because you don't want to suddenly detect that creatinine is 7 at the age of 10 years, that kidney tissue is not adequate. So I will follow up every yearly the kids who have single functioning kidney. Though most of the time they will do well, but it is better to follow up once in a year with sonography and creatinine.
Okay. So if it's normal, then we don't need to worry. And
Yeah.
surgically, they don't have to undergo anything if
Mm.
there is a remnant of the other kidney.
So no, if it is not giving rise to problem, I will not do anything. They can sometimes develop hypertension. Now, if there is early hypertension and if we can prove that it is because of that, we can take it out. But per se, dysplastic kidney, presence of dysplastic, relatively non-functioning kidney is not an indication of nephrectomy. If they have associated vesico-ureteric reflux with recurrent urinary infection, yes, we need to take it out.
Thank you so much. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Okay, friends.
Just check that box. How to collect urine to know the infection in newborn. So there are small urine bags which you can put it on the child to collect the urine. U drain, that is what they call. So you put it on that, and once they pee, you can collect. So in boys it is easy, but in girls it becomes difficult. But that is how you can do it. Or you can put a catheter, small catheter, and collect. Or you can do suprapubic puncture and collect. All means putting a catheter as well as doing suprapubic puncture. Not everybody is comfortable doing that. So most of the time you put a urine, you drain and collect the urine.
So,
Questions?
friends,
Dr.
I
Jyoti?
think so. No any more questions are remain. So, sir, it is a very interesting and informative questions answer session. So, thank you, Dr. Rasik Shah sir and Dr. Hema Yadav madam. Now here I am requesting our chairperson come our lovable DMA member Dr. Rupali Kumawat madam to give vote of thanks.
Yeah, before vote of thanks, again, I thank you all for your patient hearing and giving me and SRCC a chance to present about our hospital as well as share some of our experience. Thank you, everybody. Please go ahead.
Yes, madam.
Good afternoon, respected doctors. I am Dr. Rupali Kumawat, Borivali. Thank you very much to Team DMA for giving me the opportunity to present the vote of thanks. So thank you, Dr. Rasik Shah sir, for giving very informative talk on pediatric urology to gain additional knowledge. Thank you, Dr. Rasik Shah sir, for giving very informative talk on pediatric urology. I'm very sure that the precious knowledge will help us to give, will help us in our day-to-day practice. And once again, I would like to thank our committee as well as speakers and moderators and all doctors. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rupali ma'am. Dear friends, today is the 20th webinar of our series, and Dr. Rasik Shah sir is delivering excellent lecture to us and updating our knowledge about endoscopy surgery in pediatric urology, which is really useful to us in our general practice also. So thank you, Dr. Rasik Shah sir, Dr. Hema Yadav madam, Dr. B.K. Momin sir, Dr. Rupali ma'am, and Dr. Vinayak Desai sir. Behalf of Daisar Medical Association, here I am Dr. Jignesh Vasan Chauhan, announce the end of today's webinar session. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.